My name is Dawn Eiley Hudson. I'm a parent of 2 Ellsworth students, an Ellsworth taxpayer, and a member of the Board of Directors for the RSU 24 representing Ellsworth.
Hi, my name is Tammy Mode. I'm a citizen and taxpayer in the city of Ellsworth. I have one child that goes to the Ellsworth Elementary School, and I've had 2 children that have graduated from Ellsworth High School.
We wanted to take some time today to go over some important information that we felt was not able to be presented during the public hearing that the RSU held last week, and to go over some information in the flyer that we think is valid and important for taxpayers and citizens of Ellsworth to know and understand before they go to vote on the issue of Ellsworth withdrawing from the RSU on the 5th of November.
Right, basically there were a lot of issues that were unaddressed at each of the public hearings that have been taking place over the last couple of weeks. So basically we wanted to start off by discussing the flyer that was mailed out to each resident, as well as given to the Ellsworth students at Ellsworth Elementary Middle School and given to the kids to take home in their backpacks. Some of the areas that we wanted to address specifically is how much will Ellsworth pay or receive if the city withdraws from the RSU 24. One area that I have a concern, which I feel is very misleading, is the summer salaries. Summer salaries will need to be paid whether we're in the RSU or not in the RSU. It's not a direct effect of withdrawing from the RSU. When when Ellsworth went into the RSU assumed the summer salaries, which was nearly $1 million, and we, Ellsworth, will be assuming those summer salaries from the RSU.
So it's really an accounting issue.
It really is. It's an accounting entry. It's very common. Basically, they assumed our liability. We're going to assume their liability.
So that number is essentially a wash, and we would be paying, even if we did not withdraw, a portion of the summer salaries anyway. So the cost will be there whether we withdraw or we don't withdraw.
That is absolutely correct.
The other portion of that segment of the flyer, this is the flyer that we're referring to, by the way, the one that everybody received in the mail. And this portion that we're talking about here is on the second page and down the bottom.
It's very colorful.
It is.
I wonder how much money was spent on that.
Funny, we've asked and have not gotten an answer back from the RSU. So the flyer that we're referring to was the flyer that you would have received in the mail from the RSU that talked about what the RSU has done for Ellsworth over the past 5 years. Right. In particular, we're going to talk about how much, the portion of the flyer that talks about how much Ellsworth will pay or receive if we withdraw from the RSU. Tammy, you mentioned the summer salaries,
yes,
as they're not a valid portion of this, of what we're figuring here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We also should talk about the contracted administrative costs that they list as $329,075. And explain what that is. Those administrative costs that was a negotiated part of the contract. The RSU was getting ready to enter into contracts with central office personnel, and they felt it was important for Ellsworth to continue to participate in the payment of those contracts since we were part of the RSU when the contracts were let. So we agreed to do that. We agreed to cover some of those costs. The costs, however, are attached to individuals. They are not attached to positions. So if some of those individuals leave the RSU after we withdraw, whether to take another job elsewhere or for whatever reason, we are not bound to continue to pay for the position. If the RSU rehires for that slot, that billet, then they're responsible for paying the whole amount of that salary.
Correct.
We think that's a very inflated is a good word. Inflated number. That assumes that every person working for the RSU will stay with the RSU for the entire year. We've done some figuring. We really believe that number will be closer to $130,000. Again, that's our estimate, and this is their estimate. The superintendent's contract is mandated. We have to pay that for the first year. The state requires that. The other 3 items that were listed were major equipment purchases, debt service payments, and major capital improvements. So those 3 figures will be a cost of withdrawing, as Superintendent Lucas stated during the public hearing.
Right, because these 3 items are directly related to Ellsworth. All the major capital improvements and the purchases for capital equipment were purchases for Ellsworth schools.
Yes, and this is us paying back the portion of the funds that the other towns had contributed to Ellsworth. If you listen to her statement in the public hearing,
We're referring to
Superintendent Lucas stated that if Ellsworth were to receive money back from the RSU upon withdrawal, then it would show that Ellsworth had paid too much. And her stance was, since we were going to pay these amounts back, it showed that Ellsworth actually had received money from other towns, and that it would be a cost for us to withdraw, which is a misleading statement. Because if you look further down on this portion of the flyer, it talks about a fund balance to Ellsworth. And it's give or take however many dollars. Really, we can't figure that for sure until the end. But they're talking about, their estimate is $985,000. So just as we owe back some money to different towns because of the way the funding formula works, at the end of the day, there's a balance, an undesignated fund balance that goes forward for money that the RSU has not spent that was originally asked for from the taxpayers. We'll receive a portion of that money back.
And it's nearly $1 million.
Nearly $1 million. And if you take out those other costs that we talked about, the contracted administrative costs and superintendent contract and the summer salaries, which really none of those are really part of this formula for how much Ellsworth paid and how much Ellsworth received. Ellsworth can expect, given these assumptions, to take with us when we withdraw about $540,000. So if Superintendent Lucas stands behind her statement that if Ellsworth paid in more than it received, they'll walk away with money, then the proof is right there. We've paid in more than we have received.
Correct.
There was additional inconsistent data that was put out at that meeting with the flyer that they passed out that talked about an increase in attendance and an increase in behavior and some data. What was interesting about that flyer, if any of you have that from the meeting, it was...
And this was the flyer that was handed out at the RSU public hearing. We're not referring to the mailer right now.
That's a good point. Mine is written on, but if you look at this, it's interesting to show that the data that they are explaining and comparing is so very generalized and specific, it really does not give a good picture. They're talking about 1 month in September, 1 month in 2012 and 2013, and comparing the numbers and showing improvements. But when I looked on the DOE website, it showed different numbers. It showed that in 2008 and 2009, Ellsworth's attendance rate was 93.6%.
Well, obviously that would be the case because it's the first month of school where the majority of the children are excited about school.
Sure. And the state average was 94.1%. So we were very consistent with the state average when we were the Ellsworth School Department. The last year that the DOE shows numbers for this is 2011 and 12, but when we were part of the RSU, that attendance rate dropped from, when we were Ellsworth, it was 93.6, it dropped to 89.1. And the state average actually went up.
Oh.
So not only are we, it's even a further spread. So that information is, well, by and large, it's true what they're saying, but it doesn't give a total picture.
Right, and that's kind of the similar type of information that was given here. They're not giving the entire picture. They're only picking out points that that's not untrue, but it's not really painting the entire picture.
Right. And they also spoke about behavioral referrals, showing that since last September to this September, the number is significantly down. That shows that they say a 63% fewer referrals this September than the previous year. Also interesting, on the DOE website, when Ellsworth had their own school district, we had in the year 2000, over the years 2008, 2009, we had 25 behavioral referrals.
And how many do we have now?
The last year they reported, 2011 and 12, 44.
Oh, that's
A lot more.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't.
19 more.
When you look at a larger scale view of what they're referring to, it doesn't paint the same picture as this micro. It's also important to note that our enrollment is down in Ellsworth High School. From the last year that we were on our own, 2008 and 9, we have lost 105 students in enrollment in the high school.
Why do you think that is the case? I mean, is there any explanations for that, or what are your thoughts on this?
Given my experience with speaking with students and teachers in our school department, and parents, actually, there's a lot of
discontent, perhaps.
It's a very good word. Again, discontent. They aren't happy. The teachers aren't happy, and that's evidenced in our turnover rate. We've lost 21 teachers. 21 teachers in our high school over the past 2 years. And our parents are not happy with the results and the feedback they're getting from the administration, and they're taking their children and they're putting them in other schools.
MDI, John Bapps, GSA, is this where we're talking about?
Yep.
Local schools,
yep.
But
and some private schools.
Ellsworth.
But not Ellsworth. And for a city that can claim that they are the fastest growing city in the state of Maine, I think a drop of this size in enrollment, 105 students, is huge. And I think it's very telling.
Absolutely. That brings up another good point, that the current local 32.85% RSU cost sharing formula that the city is responsible for, because Ellsworth has become or was stated to be the fastest growing city in the state of Maine, the reorganization plan states that Ellsworth has to pay the 32.85%, but because of this new information, they have the opportunity to go back to the table and relook at those figures and work some different numbers. So there's a great likelihood that the 32.85% can increase to nearly 50%. That's a huge increase, and that is an absolute increase in your taxes.
And that formula that we're talking about explains what portion of the school budget Ellsworth is responsible for paying for. So if there is a $34 million budget, right now we're responsible for 32.85%. And in all likelihood, this is the year going into this next fiscal year that we're going to revisit that as an RSU, and everybody is anticipating Ellsworth picking up a greater share, which will definitely affect our taxes.
Absolutely. Okay. I wanted to talk about a little bit from the city side and how the city handles its budget process. In early April through May, we meet on a weekly basis, and the city goes line by line on its budget, and they're looking at every single line item throughout the entire budget. There's an opportunity there to reduce those appropriations. They can have the opportunity to ask questions from the different departments, can ask questions to the city manager about capital improvement plans, projects. There's great discussion. However, when the RSU comes in, it's just a basic amount that we have to raise. There isn't an option for the city council to dispute it. We don't have the backup information that, and when I say we, I mean the city, is not able to dispute any of the information as it can with the city budget.
Have a voice.
Have a voice, right. I wonder if it would be a different situation if the RSU sent out its tax bills for its portion. The city is responsible to send out tax bills for the county, the city portion of the budget, as well as the educational budget. I wonder if they would have a different opinion or a different outlook if they had to send the tax bills out and they had people calling them and complaining about the cost of their taxes increasing. The city, more so now, has multiple people coming in and asking for poverty abatements because they can't afford their taxes. We've seen an increase significantly since we went into the RSU. The city's gone into the RSU. We have little old ladies coming into the tax office, crying and asking, and feeling almost ashamed that they have to ask for money in order to pay for their medication, to put food on their plate, to put, have a roof over their head. These poor people, they don't feel like they have any other option but to come to the council and ask for an abatement. I just wonder if the RSU did have to send their tax bill, if they would have a different outlook on this.
One other example of an sort of inconsistent or lack of full disclosure point that we wanted to bring up was the breakdown for Ellsworth that the RSU put out at their public meeting. This is the flyer that I'm referring to. They kept referring to our local only costs this year, and they toted that the local only cost for this year for Ellsworth was $1.35 million, and they compared it to the local only portion during the last year that we were Ellsworth School Department.
Fiscal year 2009.
2009, right, and that was $1.58 million. But the portion that they did not discuss or talk about was that the RSU put an additional $2.357 million into the budget from their undesignated fund balance before they passed those tax bills or tax or assessments, the town's portion for their education onto each municipality. It significantly offset what the local only portion really truly would have been. It did not paint an accurate picture. This describes a savings that they have realized over that time, when in fact it's offset by the amount of money that the RSU put into the budget to sort of not show the whole cost picture.
And one of their claims is that they have saved or reduced the local only share. I wouldn't consider it a savings, but has reduced the local only portion by $228,000. However, which was not disclosed is that amount includes the debt payments that were made on the Ellsworth Elementary Middle School, when every time a debt payment's made, obviously the interest in the next year is not going to be as much as it was the following year. So over the past 5 years, it's reduced by $140,000. So there's $140,000 of the $228,000 that I don't really consider it a savings.
Well, no, because we would have realized that on our own, it's just an accounting thing. Again, it's nothing that they've done to change the programming or to change the spending that caused the savings. It was a natural occurrence given the
amortization
of the debt. Right, exactly. Another thing to think about when we talk, they say that they have saved. The whole point of becoming an RSU was to save on the cost of administration, to consolidate superintendents and central office staff, and to show a savings to all the communities. So to sort of figure out how we fit into that, we ran some numbers. We looked at our budget in the city of Ellsworth's education budget in 2008 and 9, the last time that we were not with the RSU, and we figured out what percentage of our budget was attributable to administrative costs. And we did the same thing for the last year. This
current fiscal year that we're in.
Current fiscal year, right, for the RSU. Now, there are other variables in there that we can't account for. They do their accounting a little bit different from ours. There were some overhead costs that were not included in their administrative costs. But by and large, we figured out that it was less than 4/100ths of a percent that Ellsworth is showing as a savings in our percentage-wise as a part of a whole budget at being part of this RSU, which sounds nice because it is a savings of some sort, until you look at what that savings bought us. When we were Ellsworth School Department, our central office staff was dedicated to Ellsworth. There was a 1-to-1 ratio. That superintendent took care of Ellsworth schools. The central office took care of everything that had to do with Ellsworth schools only. So for that, less than 1%.
So now what is it? It's
a 1 to 12 ratio.
So we're seeing all of that for
For all 12 districts. So for what minimal amount, dollar-wise or percentage-wise, that we may have realized in the savings, we have 1/12 of the services available to us because they're working over 12 communities now and not just for Ellsworth. So I guess each citizen has to decide if they think that's a good price. Certainly our teachers and our teachers in our schools certainly don't feel like it was a good price.
So that leads into another great question that I wanted to ask. I personally have been hearing a lot from the teachers. I have been here in Ellsworth my entire life. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of teachers, and I've built relationships with them since I was a child. And they come and they talk to me and they tell me how they're feeling. They want out. They feel that this union is not working.
I get this exact same stories. I get people come to the house and speak to me. They call me on the phone, teachers, and speak to me. I have private messages on Facebook begging us to not give up this fight, begging us to help them because they do not have a voice right now. They don't feel, they're afraid for their jobs if they speak out in opposition to the RSU, and I understand their position with that and respect it 100%, but they are begging us to keep pushing forward. This is not working for them, and I think that is evidenced in the lack of a voice they have had in this process. Not a single time in any hearing or privately have I heard a teacher stand up or come to me and say, please don't do this. This is not a single one. They're afraid to speak out in opposition, but they certainly would not be afraid to speak out as an advocate for the RSU, and still no one has done that either in any of the meetings.
That has to say a lot.
I think it speaks volumes for where we are. And I think that as a community, we're doing our teachers a disservice if we do not listen to them and act as their voice when they're asking us to do so.
These are the people that are teaching our children, that are with our children, more than we are with our children. And if their feelings towards this, they're not liking their job, they don't feel supportive, well, that's going to reflect in the classroom.
How can it not? If you're not happy doing your job, you're not happy in your environment, how can you do your best work?
Absolutely.
In speaking about the dissatisfaction the teachers are feeling, and the turnover rate at the high school being so high, I think it's important also to mention that there's also been a huge lack of participation on Ellsworth's part on the RSU.
There has been a lot of people that have left. Do you have that number?
I believe in the past 2 years we've had a turnover of 5 people.
Wow.
Which is a lot.
That is. Because that means that there's no voice for Ellsworth.
It does mean that there is no voice. It also means that there is not a consistent leadership. There's no consistent leadership representing Ellsworth. Currently, I've been on the board the longest of any of the current people on the board for Ellsworth, and I've been on for less than a year.
Currently, we have 1 vacancy.
Which nobody has stepped forward in interest to fill, that I'm aware of.
I believe there is a write-in.
Oh, I meant when I was referring to nobody has stepped up. Dick Gray got off the board
a
few
yes.
Months ago, and we haven't had anybody step forward in interest to fill that billet. And I think that speaks volumes. Honestly, I feel people are waiting to find out what the vote is, if we're going to get out or not. I just don't feel like there is a lot of movement in the public to want to participate in this process with the RSU.
Being on the board, what has your experience been? Because I know it was speaking with other board members. I know that there has been some dissatisfaction, and you explain to me your feelings as you've been on this board.
I was very excited to get on the board. I was very excited to be a part of this. Being on the school board is something that I had always wanted to do. I had planned to do it later, but with the current situation and Ellsworth's consideration of withdrawal, I thought it was an important time to get on the board so that I could really understand how we fit into the RSU and what our place was in it, and if it was a good fit for us or not. And I really felt the only way to do that was to really immerse myself in the process and get a good understanding. And then I have become more and more discouraged I've become more and more discouraged as time has gone on being on the board. If I feel as though we don't accomplish a lot, I feel as though the information that we get is pointed and driven from the central office. It's really our only source of information. We, according to policy, we are not permitted to go into our schools and speak with our administrators and teachers. So the only information that we do get is what is given to us from the central office staff, which I think is an unhealthy way of managing an organization. And I feel as though we're just puppets passing through whatever it is they feel is best. It's difficult to collaborate and share ideas on the board when what might be right for Ellsworth may not necessarily be right for Steuben.
And vice versa.
Vice versa, absolutely. So there is no, I feel like there's a lack of specific decision making about our community and our schools and our children. It's a very generalized feel, and it does not feel fulfilling to me. It isn't what I had anticipated it being, and I feel like throughout this whole withdrawal process, I just feel like there's a lot of resentment towards Ellsworth.
It's very unfortunate because you've done great.
Thank you.
Done very well for us on the board.
Thank you. In closing, everybody needs to just gather as much information as they can and understand fully what this means, and be very aware of where your information is coming from. I think when you see flyers come out, or you're speaking with somebody, or you hear or read something in the media, if you're taking information in that way, ask yourself who's giving the information and where is it coming from? Is it coming from a concerned teacher or a concerned citizen or a member of the RSU?
And is the information that you have, is it really painting the entire picture? Because many inconsistencies and stuff that has been, I believe, misrepresented in the flyers and the information that we've received, I really think you need to consider those when you do have that information. I think it's too much in your face.
I think that it is concerning to me that the only voices that are speaking out currently for the RSU are coming from the RSU in particular. Our
administration, specifically
the administration, and mostly the central office staff. It certainly isn't coming from the teachers. And the Citizens for Quality Education is a local group of concerned citizens who got together because they feel passionately about this issue and the importance of Ellsworth withdrawing, and I have not seen an organization like that come out.
And wow, have they grown?
Haven't they? Yeah, they have grown in big numbers, but I have not seen an opposing citizen-based group come forward touting the importance of staying in the RSU. The only voices I'm hearing are coming from the central office.
Interesting.
So if you have other questions that haven't been covered or answered, and certainly there will be many, because Tammy and I could go on and on for days about this. If you have other questions, we encourage you to visit the Citizens for Quality of Education website. There's also a Facebook page that has some good information, and I personally would be more than happy to answer any questions from our Ellsworth citizens if they still have them, and you can call me on my cell phone, and that number is 664-8161. Regardless of how you feel about this issue, we encourage you to make your voice heard and go out and vote on Tuesday, November 5th.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the polls.
See you at the polls.